tomorrow begins, or completes rather, the culmination of Donald Trump's 100 days in the White House. He has put out a press release from the White House on the White House website that indicates that it has been a historic 100 days. Here to discuss it with me is L. Joy Williams, political strategist. L. Joy, thanks so much for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a beautiful day, and so I'm glad to be with you for the very first time.
Yes, this is our first time speaking. Thanks so much for coming at the last second. I really wanted someone to chime in. I didn't want to just give my opinion of what Donald Trump has been doing over the last couple of weeks, so to speak. Let's start off with the easy question here. What grade would you give President Trump on his first 100 days in the White House?
Well, there's no secret in terms of my own personal politics, and I don't see no reason to deviate from that. So I give him an F. And it's not only from my personal politics in terms of what he's accomplished, or he thinks he's accomplished, but what he was supposed to accomplish for his base of supporters. I don't think, one, hanging sort of getting a Supreme Court nomination as a victory, I don't think is, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to, if you have control of the of Congress and you have the White House, you're supposed to be able to get your people confirmed, whether they be for cabinet positions or for the Supreme Court. So I don't, that could be one achievement that people want to hang a hat on, but I don't see that as one.
Well,
the other reason, go ahead.
Oh, no.
The other reason I give him an F is for overall leadership. And this is not only leadership amongst your base of supporters, but also supposedly being the leader of the United States.
Right.
He has created a climate of fear. He's created a climate of, being disorganized at the White House, that the position at the top of this country is disorganized, can't communicate a message very clearly, is a problem. And so that's why I give it an F. I also give him an F for not working well with others. The reason why we have this 100 days marker, and I admit, like everyone else, it's an arbitrary marker, but so much of our politics is arbitrary anyway. And so if you are going to hang your hat on the 100 days, which he did during the campaign, and say all of these things that he was going to get accomplished, in comparison with other men who have held the same position and have accomplished much more, they've accomplished that working with Congress and working with others. So if you go back to the original marker in FDR, right, it wasn't a whole bunch of, signing a whole bunch of executive orders that the reason why this marker existed. It existed in the commander-in-chief also working with the legislative body to get some real concrete work done. Right. And so far, he's been unable to do that, so he also gets an F.
All right.
So, all over. So I don't know what else.
Yeah, okay, so,
great...
at the top, you admitted your bias. I have the same bias, right? The worst decision we could have made as a country was to put Donald Trump in the White House. I was trying to find a way that I could...
And just to interrupt you just 1 second, that's not only for those of us who oppose him who are not Republicans, because you can be, Democrat, socialist, green, whatever. It's not only that, but also for Republicans, because he still created that climate that that allows them not to get anything done either.
Yeah, some of the best critiques that I hear of Donald Trump actually come from conservative commentators. So you're right. It's not just our perspective, vantage point as being progressives, liberals, or Democrats, however you want to identify. It's clearly based on what he's accomplished or the lack thereof. But what I found amazing was his press release that he put out from on the WhiteHouse.com, and he found a way to spin this pretty decently. It actually sounds good when you listen to it. He says Trump's 100 days, he has signed more bills, 28 bills, which is more than any president since since Truman, so about 70 years worth. But once you drill down underneath that veneer, you see that these are assignments of names to post offices. It's kind of a collection of I don't want to call it useless legislation, but then there's also legislation in there that's been very detrimental, right? The rollback on our privacy rights for internet access and internet service providers. So he has this position, and people are actually taking this, that he's accomplished a lot. I want to ask you about something that you mentioned in terms of getting things done. He has this legislation that he's accomplished, but his key legislation that he wanted to move, he's batting 0 for 10, if I'm not mistaken. That's number one. But the number two, all of the other things that he's gotten done has been in the form of executive order. I mean, the number one thing people complained about Republicans, about President Obama, was that he was ruling as a dictator, as a ruler, ruling by edict, I think is the exact phrase. What are your thoughts on these 28 pieces of legislation that he got signed, and the fact that most of what he's gotten done has been in the form of executive orders?
Yeah, so as someone who has worked in government before, I never call any legislation useless, because there are hundreds of people who work very hard on the language of that. So even if it's the naming of a post office or anything, there are people doing their job. So I would never use the term.
I'll eat that one. Okay, that's on me. I'll take that one back. Thank you.
But to your overall point, in that majority of these pieces have been by executive order, and that these are the same things that were used as critique against the immediate past president. It's just an example of things are bad until you are in power, and that goes from Democrats and Republicans. Either we saw that even for Democrats in terms of changing policy in terms of how the Senate is run and changing rules, the Republicans changing rules and things of that nature. So when you're in power, all things are great, and all laws and traditional rules that exist to maintain your power are great. They're great tools to be used for great things. But when you're not in power, or where things change, or someone else is in power, then they become detrimental. So we know that to be the case. And in terms of the legislation he said, or the work that he said he wanted to get done in the first 100 days, that's why I continue to give it an F. He hasn't even delivered to his base what he said he was going to do during that time. And for those of us who really care, from my own personal perspective, there are things about this system, our system of government, that I like, that I enjoy, and there are things that I would like to radically change. But for people who, invest and believe in having a president that also works with Congress, and that we have these different branches that's supposed to work hand in hand, I say to some of the civics classes that I teach, if the founders of this country would look now and see how powerful the president, the White House has become, they would be shocked. And one way that we can see the detrimental effects of that is having a Donald Trump in office.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears. There's another story that I wanted to ask you about. It's not getting a lot of coverage, all things considered, with the 100 days, North Korea, everything else that's happening in the world. But Joe Biden made some comments that really, it resonated with me in such a way that I wanted to get your feedback on it. Let's take a listen in to, this is former Vice President Joe Biden.
If you cannot say it's okay, I really mean this. We got to talk about this. And here's the deal. I've been in a lot of locker rooms. I don't know where locker rooms where it is acceptable to talk about, man, I was out this weekend and boy, I got a piece of her and I did this and I did that. The guys usually say that are usually the ugliest sons of guns in the room. The guys who do that. No, I really mean it. But here's the deal, guys. You got to speak up. You cannot let that kind of talk be bred on the college campus. So,
we didn't get the very beginning of that clip, but at the beginning of the clip, he's put it in context. He's talking about rape. He's talking about rape culture, and if someone is so drunk that they can't give consent, then it's rape. And I love El Joy. I love the way he was so definitive about it. It was clear, it was to the point, and he spoke not only about rape, but rape culture and the things that kind of foster that environment. What was your take on those comments?
You know, what was interesting is that, I read it and didn't see it, but in reading it, it was similar to the conversation that I had with my younger brother when he went to college. And I used to make him repeat it to me when he called to ask me for money. I would make him repeat stuff. And I said, it's like you and, another human being cannot consent to sex if you're both drunk, or if one of you are drunk. You can't do that. And so all of the things that the former vice president said are things that, we should be teaching young people. And it's not just about people who may engage in that activity, but the former vice president is correct. It's also the culture surrounding that. It's also, men and women getting together or men getting together and, joking about someone being passed out and taking advantage of them. All of that creates the climate that is very dangerous. And that's why, connecting it to the politics of the day, why I'm so annoyed about the current conversation, at least in the Democratic Party that's happening right now about we're too focused on social issues and not on economic issues. Because for the people that actually experience those social issues, they have very real consequences. So the social issues of talking about rape culture, if you want to define it as a social issue, and economic consequence for the women may be victims of that.
Yeah, we lost you there for a second, but if I heard you that last part, you're saying defining rape culture as a social issue, it in itself has a negative effect and even an economic negative effect on the women that go through it. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. So whether you're talking about the social issues of rape culture, whether you're talking about the social issues of those in the LGBTQ community being able to marry, that has very very real economic and health consequences. If you're talking about the social issues of Black and Latino citizens being able to have equal protection under the law, that has very economic, health consequences, including whether or not we're still living and breathing. So those social issues for individuals who experience them, they're very real consequences that people in the majority may not see that affect us on a daily basis.
Absolutely. This is your first time being on my show. I really do appreciate you coming on. I know I've followed your work through the primaries, and I might be what some people consider a Bernie bro, but I love the fact that, what you just said, it really does drill down to the nexus that we have to exist on, right? It can't be either or. It has to be both, because these social issues have very real effects on people who go through it. I love the way you said it. It's very clear. And it also has very negative economic effects. So I really appreciate you coming on, and tell anyone who was telling you that to stay away from that Bernie bro, don't worry. I'm a good one.
Well, for me, I always say if you cannot discuss your, personal and political views among those who disagree with you, then maybe you don't believe in those views at all.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm comfortable and fine with talking with anyone about what I believe. And I think it's important, particularly in the polarized state that we're in, that people not just stay in the silos and only talk to the people that agree 100% with them, because otherwise we're not going to get to any compromise in order to govern effectively, in order to live effectively, in order to progress effectively.
Absolutely. So I want to invite you back, and we're going to pick a topic when you come back on something that we disagree on, so that we can just have at it and hash it out in the most positive way we possibly can.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much.